Welcome to the Catholic Midlife podcast, where we're addressing the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. Join us each week as we spark a midlife renewal and create a firm foundation for the next wonderful, exciting, awesome season of life.
Welcome to episode 6 of the Catholic Midlife. It's great to be here. I'm Curtis.
I am Karen.
And we're here together, and we're going to talk some more about transitions. So we're going to spend this episode on transitions, and then we'll do sort of a transition out of transitions episode after that.
Awesome.
And that'll be great, and I'll preview that. Hopefully, I'll remember to do that at the end. So Karen, look, we've been talking about transitions, and I was telling you, I want to give the example of the rites of passage for, say, an Aboriginal or traditional society, because I think it's just a great way to remember all this stuff that we've been talking about.
That's a great idea. I really like that. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah. So this is a composite taken from William Bridges. He's put this composite together of societies. And so imagine a young man. He's on the threshold of manhood. He's covered with white clay. His face is white. He's blurred out. He has no identity. He left his village 2 months ago. He has ritual scars that are healed, but they're going to mark him. When he left, he was stripped and given the ritual garments for this Rite of Passage. His sleeping mat was burned up and discarded by his parents. And he's out there, he's sleeping under the stars in the savannah. And he's got some ritual prayers and things he does. His initiations master gave him those things to do. And he's out there, and he's expected to stay out there till he has an inspiration, till he has a dream or a blessing or a prayer comes to him, something that, something from sort of the beyond is brought to him, and then he brings that back to the village. And when he comes in, they welcome him, and they pretend not to know him. They don't know who he is, and he has to introduce himself. And then this goes on, and then he starts to perform the responsibilities of an adult member of his village.
Right. I'm glad you shared this, Curtis, because one of the things about the Aboriginal examples is I think they just clearly show those stages of transition, right? There's a marked ending. And there's a marked time of being in the neutral zone. And then there's that clear re-entry or new beginning with a new identity and coming back to the community in a new way with a new role, almost, as a new person.
Yeah. Now, I want to advise our listeners, no matter how tempted you are, do not paint your teenage boys with white clay and send them out onto the streets and tell them not to come back for 2 months.
Oh, yeah. Don't come back till you're a new person. Oh, the trials of the teenage years. It's true.
Alas.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And, obviously the beautiful example in the Catholic life is that baptismal sacrament and the rite of passage of dying with Christ and rising into our new identity and being announced in our new role as the son or daughter of God. It's kind of the central Christian rite of passage.
Yeah, it's a sacrament, so there's a real transformation through grace, but it's also that sacrament's a rite of passage.
Right. So there really doesn't seem to be a clear midlife rite of passage.
Yeah, it's not like there's a signature event.
Exactly. So there's a lot of events that might happen in your life, but there's no clear time or place at which that's all going to happen?
Yeah, sure. So things people experience as rites of passage, if you will, would be buying a house, your first house, or you're getting your first apartment, or getting married. That's a
Right.
big one.
That's huge.
The first baby, that's a shocker.
Mm-hmm.
The empty nest, but that's often long and slow and chaotic
Exactly.
transition.
Yes. Yes. Retirement sometimes. There's a lot of things that can trigger really a transitional experience in midlife. And some of them are external, but a lot of them, as we've been reading, are internal types of transformations.
Yeah, so Jonathan Rauch wrote The Happiness Curve, and the virtue of the book is that it brings together a lot of interviews and some research. And he talks about, especially through the interview portion of the book, shifts that can happen in a successful midlife transition. It's shifts from moving from extrinsic motivation, extrinsic goals to intrinsic goals. So instead of being measured by what's outside of you, it's the things that are internal to you that start to drive your own definition of success. So that's kind of a category.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, and so related to that, there's a shift from external or received values, if you will, to living out your internal values, those things that you've really identified as, okay, this is what's really important to me, and this is what I need to do, and living those internal values more so than perhaps values received from our culture or from our 20s, which is a very ambitious time. And that's another shift that can happen, is a shift from ambition and looking to external rewards to more of a focus on connection, and especially family. And hopefully most of us aren't going to go through a midlife crisis where we quit our job and lose our income and spend a bunch of money on cars and stuff. But even as we continue in our roles, the things that we value in them will begin to shift.
Yes, and I've heard people say things like in this same area, things like, well, I just don't care so much what other people think, or I'm not living according to other people's values anymore. I've really centered in on my own purpose and values, and that's a shift for many people in this season, I think.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interesting question. What values are going to be controlling? I mean, are you going to regress to a second childhood?
Right.
I was talking with somebody at the launch party about this, the podcast launch party that we had, and their observation was, well, we got married and we had the kids, and that planned our lives for 20-something years. Now we have to decide, are we going to kind of regress now that we're not being forced to carry all these responsibilities in the same way? Or are we going to, reach higher for some new things?
Exactly. Be intentional about what's coming next. Mm-hmm. One thing I remember from that book too is that it's very common to have sort of what he calls a happiness slump in somewhere in the midlife transition, and that's very normal, and many people have it. But it's like once you get through the slump, there's actually a higher indication of positive emotion and life satisfaction that people have.
Yeah. So it's really nice to know that if you're in your 40s and just feel kind of bummed, that you're definitely not alone. And most everybody, we can expect life to get better just from that kind of standpoint.
Right.
And this brings up something where Jonathan was digging into the research around the expectations. And a very strong pattern is, hey, in your 20s, boy, the world's your oyster, right? And you're looking out there and you've got all these great visions of what's going to happen, where you're going to live, the car you're going to drive, the kind of awesome husband you're going to get, the awesome wife, the career, the college, if you're one of those people, all those things. And we have these tremendous ideas. And then we get to midlife, and at least some of those things aren't happening.
Right, exactly.
And we've got this big negativity bias. So guess which ones we remember most?
The things that haven't panned out for us.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
not the wonderful things that have.
Yeah, exactly. And this is a pattern. And expectations, they are funny things. That's like us reaching out from our past to control ourselves now.
Wow. Wow. So would you say then that one of the really great possible things that a person could get out of the midlife transition is being able to look positively at their life and release some unrealistic expectations they may have had?
Yeah, exactly. So releasing expectations and really, as always, cultivating your optimism and remembering all the good possibilities and choices that you have.
Right. Right.
So I like to think of releasing the expectations really as trading in, as a kind of a bartering. You're taking this old thing that doesn't serve you anymore, and you're going shopping for something new that's more important to you. But unfortunately, the trade doesn't happen instantly, right? It's a transitions process. So there is a letting go of, okay, I'm not going to be the whatever, the fill in the blank, or, well, here's my kids and here's what they're doing and here's how they are. And I love them very much. At the same time, in some ways, my unrealistic expectations, I'm seeing how unrealistic they were.
Right. Because reality is sinking in.
Reality is different. But it's a wonderful freeing process to be able to, and that's what they deserve, right? Is they deserve to be seen and embraced and loved for who they are now, and not your silly expectations, for heaven's sakes.
This is really making sense with something I've seen in many clients, which is this renewed sense of priorities and purpose for the next season of their life. And I think it is connected as well to this releasing of expectations, that when that happens, there's like more energy and power to move into the new sense of purpose or the newness of their person that they want to cultivate.
Actually, Karen, I've got a great example of that. So there was a lady and her husband, and she was going to retire early because of his timing, and they were going to build this beautiful cabin on this beautiful lake. And they had been looking forward to it for a long time. And the plans were at a certain stage of preparation. I'm not sure if they had full architecturals, but they had been looking forward to this. But what had happened was she had become involved with a certain nonprofit, and she was involved in this intense service. Think about serving the poor.
Right.
And she was being asked to step up and take more responsibility in that role. And there was a big conflict with the cabin on the lake. And they had a big reassessment. And they decided that she was going to stay there. She was going to lean into that nonprofit work. And it wasn't clear that if the cabin was going to happen or not in the future, just due to the finances and other timing considerations.
Right, right. So this new sense of purpose and mission was really redefining how they had expected that time to go and what they would be doing.
Yeah, and they were able to say, it's okay if we don't get the cabin. It's okay because I can choose other things.
Right.
And it was created a lot of freedom for them. At the same time, as you can imagine, there's some letting go around that sort of thing.
Yes. Yes. I'm thinking actually of a similar client story, but with a little different outcome. I'm thinking of someone who this couple had been as well planning on this sort of retirement cabin, and they had some things come up in their family, and they were really questioning whether they could move ahead with the cabin. Mm-hmm. And for them, it was also a matter of releasing expectations, but in their case, it was releasing their expectations about what was going to happen in the family and what it was going to look like. And in their case, they reassessed their values and their purpose, and they moved ahead with the cabin, even in light of some of these other family contingencies. And the reason I'm sharing this is because, ultimately, it's not about the outcome or the decision. It's about how you get there and your process and how you're reassessing your purpose and your values and your expectations. And I think I want to highlight this because I think a lot of people don't understand what coaching is and what we do. And the fact is, many of us make decisions and choices so often with unconscious motivations and unconscious assumptions and expectations and interpretations. And what we do in coaching is we help people to really dig into those and pull out the unconscious choices they're making so that they can make conscious choices, whatever that is for them, however that ends up.
It's really remarkable how we can be controlled by so many things. I mean, we're products of our experience, and
yes,
and it's interesting in these cabin stories. It's more than a matter of just working it out with your spouse and having a good process. It's a matter of, like you say, your mission, your purpose, those other things.
Right.
Well, we've been talking about transitions and transitional processes, and we started off with that example of the traditional or perhaps Aboriginal rite of passage with the young man thrust out into the wilds of the savannah. And talking about those kinds of rites of passage, I think it's a great summary of the phases of a transition, the ending, the messy middle, and the new beginnings. And it also helps me appreciate our Catholic tradition of having rites of passage, like baptism and First Communion, and just having seasonal rites and liturgical cycles. It's just shows the beauty and the importance of marking the human experience as embodied persons, marking the natural human experience and the supernatural realities that we experience in Christ. The next two seasons or episodes are going to be about hope. So one's going to fall before Easter and one after Easter. And Karen, you've really been the one that's focused on this topic from the theological perspective. And I've just really been looking forward to discussing hope in those episodes. It's been great to be here with everybody. Thanks for checking in and visiting with us. If you would like to have our guide to transitions, it's a free guide. You can go to our website at thecatholicmidlife.com and look for the guide, fill out the form, and we'll send it right to you. Thanks for being here. Thank you so much for listening to the Catholic Midlife podcast. It's great to be here with you. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite app or platform. leave a review. That's so helpful so that others like you can find the podcast. And be sure to tell your friends. We'll see you next week.